Pray with me. Gracious and loving God, we are indeed here in your presence on holy ground. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, our Creator and Redeemer. Amen. Those of you who've been here a while have probably figured out by now that I like liturgical seasons, like Lent and Advent and Epiphany. I love that stuff. After having been raised in traditions that didn't honor those kinds of seasons, when I came to MCC and the Episcopal Church later in life, I found great meaning in them. I remember the first time I went through a whole Lent and Holy Week and then got to Easter. I felt like I had suddenly unlocked the doors of a huge mystery, because I had been told all of my life that Easter was the holiest of days for Christians, but I had never really understood it until I went through Lent and Holy Week. I hope that you also will enjoy sharing that insight as I share with you as we enter the season of Lent, beginning with Ash Wednesday this week. What I also love about liturgical seasons and the rhythms of the church year is that the Sunday before Lent is always this beautiful, mystical story of the transfiguration of Jesus. It gives us a moment to ponder the mystery of our faith before we dive deep into a season of preparation and penitence. I say mystery because there is no logical way to understand going up on a mountain and Jesus' face becoming dazzling as the sun, and his clothes becoming radiant as light, and Moses and Elijah showing up there with him. That's just not logical. And let me tell you the truth, I like logical. I like to explain things. I like for things to be in neat little boxes. I'm a very linear thinker. Not only that, I'm really good at explaining things. I was a high school teacher. I can explain all kinds of things to all kinds of people. And I have to tell you that my first instinct when confronted with a story like the Transfiguration is to just explain it away. It's to ignore all the dazzling and the bright and the Elijah and Moses and all of those things. It's to just explain it away, bring it down to earth. I actually preached a sermon once on this passage that encouraged people to come down off that mountain and do the real work. I guess it was fine at the time. I trust that God always has a word for God's people, even if God's messengers are a little whatever. But that sermon didn't really address what happened up on the mountain. We need these stories of transfiguration and mystery and dazzling radiance and prayer, because we need the hope that they provide that this world can be holy and beautiful and better than it is right now. We need to see moments of transfiguration in our own lives too. And we need to believe them for what they are, even when we can't explain them, even when we can't hang on to them. We need to name and believe in transformation at a deep spiritual level, today and always. Many years ago, when I first came out as not straight, I couldn't imagine a scenario where I would be a pastor in a church that welcomed me and all of us in our full humanity and authenticity. At that time, I was a public school teacher. And the threat of being found out as somebody in a relationship with a person of the same sex, that threat was the loss of my job, and most likely the loss of my ability to get any other teaching job at the time. And so I spent a lot of energy those first few years being very fearful, very anxious about my job. And then one day a student came to see me to ask if I would help her start a gay-straight alliance at our school. I knew why she chose me to ask. I knew that she knew why she chose me to ask. I also knew that parents and administrators and all kinds of other people would also know why she chose me to ask. I was scared. I was terrified. I didn't want to lose my status. I didn't want to lose my job. I was not ready for this kind of transfiguration. So I tried to dissuade her. I told her we tried this before and it blew up in our faces, which was true. There had been newspaper columns, and the school board had gotten involved, and it had all devolved into some generic diversity club. I told her that she might end up being outed to her mom. I thought I had dissuaded her, But the next day she came to my classroom and she said to me, I came out to my mom and I wrote this letter to the school board. When did we start? Well, there was the mystery, completely unexpected, of this young prophet showing up in her school, in my classroom. And I heard God's voice, and I was compelled to listen. Because prophets show up for us in a lot of ways, don't they? They can be high school students, people without homes, our politically opposite relatives. Yeah. Whoever they are, though, they will speak an unexpected word of truth, and then sometimes they will challenge us in our lives. And so the dazzling light of something new shone in a big public high school in a small town in Michigan. And kids who had been pushed to the margins and spat on and shoved into lockers and beaten and humiliated and ridiculed suddenly became the center of my attention. They were my kids. And as an advisor to the GSA, I was pretty much outed to anybody who cared to notice. And yet, the sky did not fall. I did not lose my job. Nobody else lost their job. Turns out I enjoyed a lot of stability and privilege that I didn't even realize I had. Trusting the mystery, the prophet that came into my life, turned out to be safe. The same wasn't true for my career students, though. I spent more time sitting in the hallway with crying LGBTQ kids than I would have ever thought possible. And to a person, they were crying and distraught because of the teachings of conservative Christianity. Some were rejected by their parents, others were rejected by their churches. For some, it was both. One young man was told by his church that he had to choose between being president of the GSA and continuing in his church theater career. Yeah, he chose the GSA. It seemed that no matter how often, how passionately, how cogently I talked to them about my Christian faith, which was nothing like what they were getting in their churches, no matter how much I told them this, those kids were still going to feel the need to ask me, am I going to hell? That's a large piece of the reason I went to seminary. Because no, honey, you're not going to hell. I didn't know what I was going to do after seminary, but I knew that I wanted the world to be different for those kids and for everybody else. And I knew that Jesus was calling me away from the familiar into something new and scary. And so I took that leap of faith and I walked into the mystery. Actually, it may be more like Peter and John and James. I was sort of dragged along up the mountain for the ride. But God does what God can with what God has to work with. I wasn't ready for a transfiguration, but I got one. Much like the transfiguration of moving from Connecticut to South Florida. Sometimes you just don't know where you're going to find God and how God is going to call you. What are those moments for you? I'm sure you've had them and continue to have them in your lives. When have you been transformed or transfigured by God and God's action? When have you been surprised by where God has taken you? We need these mystical stories like the Transfiguration so we can remember that God is beyond our understanding, that we're not always going to have the answer. God can show up on a mountain. God can cause God's children to be dazzlingly bright. God can bring us prophets and sages. God can remind us of our belovedness. We don't have to understand it. We just have to believe it's possible. As Christians, we hold to the ridiculous notion that the world can be better than it is and that we have a part to play in that. It is our ability to sit with stories of mystery and wonder. It is our willingness to engage our holy imagination. It is those things that inform our faith and give us hope and resilience in the hard times. A few of us have been reading Ta-Nehisi Coates' Between the World and Me throughout Epiphany. A few of us have not been happy with me for picking said book. At any rate, Coates is the black writer for The Atlantic who made the case for reparations in a big essay in that magazine. He's an amazing writer and prophet, and he got us to delve into some topics that we might never have talked about, even though it was difficult. And throughout the book, which is really just a long essay, he asserts repeatedly that he is glad he was raised without religion. He boasts that his parents rejected all dogmas. He seems to view religion and faith as some sort of escapist fantasy. But by the end of the book, the attempt to work out his ideas, he says, I thought of my own distance from an institution, the church, that has so often been the only support for our people. I often wonder if in that distance, I've missed something. Some notions of cosmic hope, some wisdom beyond my mean physical perception of the world. Yeah. I don't need for people to believe as I do. It's fine with me that Ta-Nehisi Coates is an atheist. I believe in Jesus and God incarnate. And I don't accept for a minute the notion that people who don't share our Christian faith are somehow doomed to hell for eternity. And I rejoice in the fact that those of us who do choose to be Christian have a way of making meaning in the world that does go beyond our own limited imaginations. I do rejoice in that cosmic hope. I do rejoice in that wisdom that is beyond my own understanding. I hold tight to the notion that another world is possible. Friends, our lives and our bodies are holy and beautiful, and we can co-create a more just world, and we Christians have a tool to do that. We have something to offer the world. Our God chose to become human and experience life as one of us, experiencing all the joys and all the challenges of being in one of these bodies. And so, my friends, I believe in the mystery of the Transfiguration. I don't know how it happens, but I know that God's voice is speaking to all of us when God says from the cloud, "This is my own, my beloved, on whom my